Currently, when we add a product to our shopping cart, we don't get any visual feedback. So in this lecture, we're going to make a small change here. And when we click this Add to Cart button, we want to display the number of products of this type in our shopping cart. Also, when we refresh the page, we should see the number of products of a given type in the shopping cart as well. So here's what we're going to do. When the page loads, we're going to get the user's shopping cart from Firebase and then give it as an input property to each product cart. Each product cart knows the product it's going to render, so it can use this shopping cart to find the quantity of products of that type in the shopping cart. So the first thing I want to do is here in product cart component, I'm going to define a new input property. So input, we're going to call this shopping cart, set it here. Now at this stage, we don't have an interface like shopping cart. Potentially we can add that in the future. So here's our input property. Now let's go to the template for this component. So this is our footer area. The first thing I want to change here is this ng if. I want to move this from this button to the footer because in the footer we're going to have more items. So we should either see all these items together or none of them. So cut and paste it here. So here's our button. Now after that, I'm going to add a div where we display the quantity. Now here, calculating the quantity involves a fairly complex expression. And I don't want to write that here because it's harder to unit test it this way. So I'm going to go to our product cart component, define a method here, get quantity, and implement that logic here. With this, we can easily unit test this method in the future. So to find the quantity, I'm going to go to our shopping cart. We know that this shopping cart has a property called items. And in the items, we should have a property whose key should be exactly like the key of this product here. So this.product.$key. So this returns a reference to that shopping cart item. Now chances are we don't have an item by that key. So this may be null. So if we have an item, I'm going to return item.quantity. Otherwise, I'm going to return 0. Also, to make this code a little bit more robust, first I want to make sure that we do have a shopping cart here. Otherwise, we're going to get a null reference exception. And the reason I'm going to do this null checking is because initially, when we get the shopping cart from Firebase, there's going to be a tiny delay. So during that time, this shopping cart is going to be null. So if we don't have shopping cart, we're going to return 0. Now that we have this method, I'm going to go to our template and here render the quantity of this product in the shopping cart. So we call get quantity. So these are the changes that we had to make in our product cart component. Now we need to go to our products component, which is the consumer of the product cart. And here we need to get the shopping cart. So I'm going to inject the shopping cart service of type shopping cart service. So here we need to do something like this. Shopping cart service dot. We don't currently have a method to get the user's cart. So let's go ahead and add this. Shopping cart service. So look, we actually do have a method, but this method is private. So I'm going to remove this private modifier. Now, one thing I don't like here is this parameter, cart ID. To make the API of this service simpler, I want to remove this parameter. I don't want to calculate the cart ID because the shopping cart service should know what is the ID of the shopping cart of the current user. Now, before I make this change, let's find all the references to this method. So I'm going to right click here, find all references. And the shortcut is Shift and F12. So currently we don't have any references to this method and it's safe to modify its signature. So Let's delete this parameter. Now we need cart ID, and we can get that easily from this method here, get or create cart ID. So let cart ID equal this.get or create cart ID. Now note that this method is an async method, so it returns a promise. So look, if you look at the return type, you can see cart ID is a promise of any. Here I don't want a promise. Here I want the actual ID. So I'm going to await this. And because I applied await here, I need to make this method async. Now look at cart ID. Its type is any. Now to make this a little bit more explicit, we can annotate this method with promise of string. Because the cart ID we are returning here is actually a string. With this, now look at the type of cart ID, it's a string, okay? So now that we have this new method here, getCart, we can go to our component and use it. So here in products component, shopping cart service dot getCart. So again, this method returns a promise of Firebase object observable. So to get that actual observable, we need to await this promise. Like this. So let cart await. Now, we cannot await a call in a constructor because this requires us to make the constructor async, and TypeScript compiler doesn't like this. So constructors cannot be async. So the workaround is to implement the onInit interface and initialize the cart there. So implement onInit, and here after the constructor, I'm going to add ng onInit, and then I'm going to move this line there. Like this. Now let's make this async. That's perfectly fine. We just need to call this.shoppingCartService, which means we need to decorate this parameter in the constructor with a private keyword. Now look at the cart. So this is actually observable. We should not initialize it like this. So instead, I'm going to put this in parentheses and call subscribe. Then we get a cart, and we can use that to initialize this.cart. Now let's define this field here. So cart of type any. Again, in the future, we can define an interface like shopping cart and annotate this properly. Just remember, because we subscribed to this observable here, we should remember to unsubscribe when this component is destroyed. So I'm going to implement the onDestroy interface here. In the meantime, I'm going to define a field called subscription of type subscription. And here, set this.subscription to this expression. And now let's break this up into multiple lines so it's more readable. And finally, ng onDestroy. And here we simply call this.subscription.onSubscribe. So now we have our shopping cart. Let's go to our template and pass this object to our product cart. So this is where we have our product cart. I'm going to set the shopping cart input property, shopping-cart, to this cart field here. Now let's test the application. All right, so here we have the quantity of each product below this button. If I click this button again, you can see the quantity is increased. Beautiful. Let's refresh the page. And we have the previous numbers here. Perfect. So our visual feedback is working properly. In the next lecture, we're going to improve the look and feel of this card.